So today we're going to look at the roll collar, which can also then be used to form a hood. Okay, and I just want to, before we draft the pattern, just to discuss some of the terminology. So obviously you've got your centre front, and then you're going to add your wrap, so about 2 centimetres wrap onto your coat or jacket, unless you wanted it as an edge-to-edge fastening and you'd keep it onto the centre front. And then we've got this break line, and the break line is from the inside of the neck, and that comes down to your desired position here. And then the roll collar, your design decisions are the depth of it, and then the height of the stand. And this is from here, this is the shoulder seam, and then the neck seam. And you can see that this is grown on to the front piece. So all of this, there's no seam here, this is all grown on onto the front pattern piece, and that's what we're going to draft today. And you need to make a decision about the height of the stand, so about 2 or 2.5 centimetres is the norm, and that is how high the collar stands up the neck. Okay, and then we're just going to look at drafting half, because obviously that's your back neck facing, and it will just, that also stays half there, and then when it's worn and neatened, you can see that that's got the roll over the top, so you can see the stand from the neck up, that's your 2.5 centimetre stand, and then that's your design decision on how big, because obviously shawls can be quite long, and how it fits. You have to trial and experiment with these, because sometimes they don't always sit nicely on the neck there, and then obviously it's going to have grown on. So this is the roll collar. So we've got our jacket block, and I've just traced off the front, and then you've got all your design decisions, so you might be working with a princess seam, something like that, but I've just done it for today, just a plain front, and I haven't obviously drafted it all out. And I've just got them in at my centre front line here, and I've drawn the neck and this point here. So I discussed when I was just showing you this roll that we need. So from the inside neck, I'm going to add on 2.5 centimetres for the roll. Okay, so I've just from that neck position there added 2.5 centimetres, and then line that up with the neck. And then my other design decision is that break that I spoke about. I'm just going to, they're normally quite low, obviously it could go to the waist, the chest, it's up to you where you go, so I'm just going to go 25 centimetres down from the neck. So look at it on the body, see what you decide. And I'm going to add on my wrap, so I'm adding a 2 centimetre from the centre front out, which means my total wrap would be 4 centimetres. This is where my button would sit, okay, with my buttonhole, and that's how it will be fastened. Obviously they all line up on that centre front. So opposite where I want my break to be, I'm going to draft that first line. That's the break. Okay, so below that decision, that will just be added on, and then I draft it with 1/4 inch seam allowances here, right to that point, and here will be a notch, because that's where it tells you to sew to. Now I'm going to add my collar on, and I also need to know from this point here, this is my front neck, I'm going to add on the back neck measurement, and we're working on the half. So I've measured my half back neck, and it's 8.3 centimetres. So I'm going to continue this break line up, and I'm going to go up 8.3 centimetres to there, and that's half of my back neck here. There to there, and that's 8.3 centimetres. Okay. Then I've got my design decision about how deep I want my collar to be. I'm going to draft mine about 7 at the neck point there, about 7 centimetres I think would be nice. So it's 7 centimetres plus the roll. Obviously if you only want a small roll, you need it to cover that 2.5, so it has to be at least 3 centimetres, so when it rolls back it covers the stand on the neck, so it goes up and over. So you've got your collar that is going to sit on your neck here, and you've got this roll and it comes down, and obviously this height here, this is your stand height there, my 2.5 centimetres. So this collar here, this shawl collar, has to cover that stand that goes up and over, if that's your shoulder coming out there. So they're normally quite wide and they come round like a shawl collar like this. Okay, but if you wanted a smaller one, that's fine, just a neat little roll collar, but this would have to cover the roll on the neck. So make sure that you consider that design. Obviously it comes down and we've got the button fastening there, and then the break, the wrap and the break comes up. Okay, so you've got that designed out. And your soft, it could be a blouse, it could be, but I'm looking at it for a jacket. So I've got my design decision 7 centimetres coming out here. So I'm going to draft that line from my break point, at this point here, work net. I'm not going to do a straight line, because it will look, if I do a straight line, it will look like it dips in. It might be something you want. Obviously you can create different shapes, notches, shapes, things like that. But I'm just going to do this slightly swelled out shape that I want to achieve, like a shawl. So I'm going to come out, I know here's 7 centimetres, so if you sort of consider you want that to be 7 coming round and then bring it in nicely. So it's all about using your eye. So I sort of head it out a bit more and then bring it round. So I'm going to bring it out and then I'm going to start walking that round. And obviously this is just my first draft. I might change my mind on what I want it to be like. You know, I might say that's quite nice. Maybe it's come out too far, so I want to bring it down to 7, or I say, well, actually, I quite like it, the 7.5. And I'll just do that and then bring that and soften it round. This is what you need. This is why we're doing our toile, so we can then decide what angle that's going to be, whether that's a bit too severe, whether I soften that a little bit. But you want it to be quite nice. And then it's just the last bit that's straight. It's all about that nice fluidity of the line. Now we've gone from here, added the back neck on, so at that point I'm going to add, do a right angle. Okay, draw my line, and then this is going to be my 7, well I've gone more, haven't I, so 7.5 centimetres. So I'm going to put that up to 7.5 centimetres to here. It's a bit confusing now because I've got my little sketch in the way. So this is my line here that I'm using. All right. Now this, if I draft this as it is, this will not go up and around the neck, so I'm going to have to slash this open. All right. So my front pattern piece includes all of the collar, the shoulder, all of that. This is my front pattern piece, and then I use my back with my back neck, and they sew to this point. So the shoulder seams will sew obviously to here, and I've got to add, beg your pardon, I've got to add that roll on there as well, so it's still from that shoulder point. So I've added my roll past here so it goes up, but on my actual pattern piece I need to ensure that I've got that roll included. So it's all about that neck point there. Alright, so this will then sew on to my neck. So I've got that roll draft line there, and then I need to make sure I've got that drawn here and make sure that's the right measurement. Okay. And so that's where I'm going to have my pattern, along here and up and along there. Okay, so we need to slash this open, slash it all the way down to the neck, and it's going to bend round. Now this is a bit of a guesstimate, how much extra length we need to go round, how much do you want this to fall over. So what I've done is I've done a couple of slash lines, and then I'm going to slash that up. This is why we always work net, so that we can get our pattern exact. Cut that one there up to that point. Make sure you don't cut through, and that will allow us to bend that. You can see how that is now looking a bit more like a shawl. You might want to do it in a few more places, but we're going to soften that curve. Okay, and we're just going to think about how much we want to add in to that wedge. I'm going to start with 2 centimetres, so a total of 4 centimetres. I could just add it all in here, but I like to blend it out and make it a bit soft, and it just means that that will fall a little bit lower potentially. Okay, you can see I need to slash it from here because this line is the back neckline, so this is what's going to sew to the back neck. So I'm going to put a piece of paper behind it, stick it all down, a bit of tape. Okay, so we're going to just then soften that line in between, so we've got that nice roll continuing. And this needs to be a right angle at this top point because this is your centre back. Alright. And what we're going to do now is cut it all out net, or cut it all out and work net, but you're going to need to add all your seam allowances on to make your pattern piece. And then you need to make a facing and your back. When you make your facing pattern piece, so this will have, you need to remember to add roll along this top edge, which blends back to nothing at this point. Alright, because obviously the collar comes up and over. So this is your net draft. So for your front, this is your front. Remember all your straight grains, your centre front is your straight grain. You will add all your seam allowances on. I would suggest 1 centimetre. You'll have a centre back neck seam, and then I would suggest 1/4 inch or 7 millimetres along this edge here, all the way down. Okay, and that's your front piece. And then when you make your facing pattern piece, like you have a back and a back neck facing, that piece will be from the neck, the size from this is your neck point, remember here. So this would be your facing pattern piece. Okay, and then you'll just draft that like we always have a facing. Remember, it needs to come round from here, and so this will be your facing pattern piece. Okay, and then you will draft that along here. Okay, this all stays exactly the same, but here along this leading edge you need to add about a couple of millimetres for the roll all the way down, and then it just blends in to the break point to nothing. Alright, so on the facing you add roll onto the facing only, because it's the facing that sits on the outside, and then add all your seam allowances. And then you need to remember to make your back neck facing the same to join at the shoulder. You see what you've drafted is the front, and this is this under piece here, and then by adding the roll onto the facing, which is the one on the inside here, you've added the roll onto the facing, which allows it to roll under, and then you'll be able to do your understitching. The understitching will come down and it will stop short of the break, and it will be on the inside of the roll collar, but then on the inside here you'll add understitching to the facing. So you start either side, so there'll be no understitching near the break. Okay, and you just have to make sure that it's not seen. Okay, and then you can see that the facing, and it all sews in together there with the back neck facing. And that's your pattern draft to create the roll or shawl collar, which you can then also extend into a hood if you wanted